Thank you very much for the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. My perspective is from a developing market and as an entrepreneur, so please bear in mind I'd like to make some observations in that context. I think the first thing to say, from my perspective, is when you think about the crisis and about the effectiveness of capitalism, I think it's important to firstly understand the world is a better place than it was. Over the last 30 years, we've halved poverty. We've grown GDP by 50% per person. We've largely got on top of communicable diseases. HIV rates are down, infection rates are down, malaria, tuberculosis is down, life expectancy is up 10%. The world is a better place. I think it's important to say that, to contextualize the crisis that we've seen. Of course, the crisis itself creates a dramatic impact on jobs, on trade, on distortions all over the world, and it's a terrible thing. But it must be said that it's not a function solely of capitalism. I think it would be the wrong conclusion. I think it's a function of specific issues, specific acts, specific policies, excessive lending, too low interest rates, inappropriate innovation in the financial sector. But I must say, and I say this from a developing market, the message that capitalism is bad is a dangerous message. In Africa, we really are looking at the dawn of a rising continent. It's the fastest growing continent in the world today. And it has the real potential to reap the demographic dividend that is potentially present in Africa. It needs economic growth. It needs businesses. It needs well-run businesses. It needs the rule of law. It needs a belief in the markets. And the reality is, unfortunately, I think everywhere, but particularly in developing markets, the belief that capitalism works is a tenuous idea. And there are many populists around there who would love to kind of decry the power of capitalism, and to an extent that leads to ultimately failed states. So I need to stress that I think the message that capitalism is bad and is a cause for the crisis is maybe a dangerous one. Only business creates prosperity. Only business creates prosperity. Governments don't. We need businesses, and they only will function, and entrepreneurs will only start if they believe in the things they build, they can own. And the rule of law will be present. And those concepts that I think those concepts that underpin capitalism are fundamental. Having said that, of course, given the global financial crisis, there are many lessons to be learned and a lot of rethinking about many different issues, from bank regulation to all kinds of things. I know that, but I wanted to make a few quick comments about what I think are important social issues. The one is the issue of inequality. What we've seen today is an unacceptable rise in levels of inequality within countries. While GDPs have risen, poverty's halved, countries are less equal. And that's not socially tolerable and leads to potentially social instability and retards growth. It is quite fascinating to understand that people see prosperity in a relative way. While a society gets more prosperous, if people are relatively less prosperous than others, it leads to instability. And the other observation I would make from a perspective of looking at inequality is, it's interesting, when you look at the Gini coefficients across different countries, it doesn't really matter what economic system they have. So China is more unequal than the US. I think Vietnam is more unequal than the UK and Germany. It turns out that regardless of the economic system that you overlay onto countries, the inequality tends to rise anyway. And that's a major, major problem. The second point is a fascinating issue, and it comes out of, I think, technology and globalization, is that we're entering a time now where talent is all-powerful. A small group of the elite tend to get all the upside in the gain. And that's because, unlike before, a superstar CEO or sports star or trader has the ability to play globally, and therefore they can really have a much bigger audience to play out of. That's a problem. It's creating a battle. Instead of capital versus labor, what we're seeing now is capital versus talent. And ironically, labor and capital are now fighting against this small group of talent, and that really, I think, is problematic. At the same time, at the low-skilled end, there's just no jobs. So you have this terrible paradox, or this terrible problem happening now of too few jobs, too few people at the top end to fill the jobs, and too many people at the bottom end who don't have jobs, and that, I think, will create great instability for us. I also want to make a remark from our own industry, the financial services sector. It's problematic. We do create a distortion in the markets. Structurally, we pay more than other industries. You can earn more in financial services than elsewhere. And that means that the best and brightest come to financial services. I think it's a bad thing if done in extreme. Instead of people becoming doctors and finding the cure for cancer, instead of the smartest and brightest starting on businesses, they're going to financial services. And that retards innovation, it retards entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship levels are lower than they were before, and that's very, very problematic. It is only entrepreneurs that create jobs ultimately. The fourth point I'd like to make is the issue, which was made by Sir Ronald earlier, the issue of lack of equality of opportunity to an extent. I think that inequality is tolerable if there's an equality of opportunity. And the only way to achieve that is through access to basic services. We need universal healthcare, we need universal access to education, and that's a challenge. I think healthcare, a field I'm very, very familiar with, is one of the biggest challenges going forward. It is unaffordable, it's going to bankrupt countries, and that's a problem. But in the context of that, there are real opportunities. I'm not sure if you know that three lifestyle choices lead to 4 conditions that drive 50% of mortality. Smoking, poor nutrition, and poor physical activity lead to 50% of mortality. Just getting on top of those things will really remove the burden of healthcare systems, and I think that is crucial. And then finally, the last point, and maybe I do agree with some of the points made by Sir Ronald, is I think we need a different perspective on the role of business. The idea that business just focuses on profitability and shareholder value is an outdated thing. Business has to be much more activist. Business has to be much more innovative in solving problems. And I'd say we need to make sure that businesses are run around shared value, creating a society that's better. I think if we can do that as business, if we can build businesses that are focused on building society, I think we have the opportunity to legitimize capitalism and kind of minimize inequality. So my sense is that the system largely does work. It needs a rethink. But I think we're left today with 5 or so, in my view, very complex social issues that I think we have to deal with. Thank you.